before him, he arrived with nothing.
Well, I first started working as a field laborer.
Eventually, he amassed 2,000 acres of prime California farmland.
I got 3 kids. One of them is already taken control, and he's a full-time involved with us. And I got another boy, youngest one. He's going to school. My daughter's going to university right now. I'm doing very good. I feel pretty happy, and farming is a very good business, and it's a pretty nice, natural way to live, and I like it.
The Punjabis formed communities in other areas as well, such as Stockton, California, where the first permanent Sikh temple, or Gurdwara, was dedicated in 1915. In Astoria, Oregon, by 1906, nearly 100 Indian workers lived together on this street the locals called Hindu Alley, even though most were Sikhs, not Hindus.
People over there were very nervous about them because they were all very tall Sikhs from Punjab, and they all have turban on it, and they couldn't figure out why they were having turban. What does turban means, So finally, after 2 years, they found out these are very peaceful workers. They just want to work. They don't want to do anything. And the people find out too that they work hard and send money back home.
But fear sometimes overtook reason. In 1907, tensions got out of control in the northwest mill town of Bellingham, Washington. The local newspaper reported, "This is the type of man driven from this city as the result of last night's demonstration by a mob of 300 men and boys."
They thought that they were stuck here forever. The laws were completely against them. They weren't allowed to bring their wives. They weren't allowed to bring relatives.
They weren't allowed to visit back and forth between India and the U.S. After 1910, new Indian arrivals might be endlessly detained and scrutinized at the Immigration Center on Angel Island. Finally, in 1917, the Barred Zone Act cut off all Asian immigration, period. In the 1923 case of the Punjabi farmer Bhagat Singh Thind, the highest court made it supremely clear that they were not wanted as citizens of the United States.
The decision was that although he was Caucasian, he was not white in the popular meaning of the word. And if the man on the street wouldn't call him white, he could not become an American citizen because only whites or blacks could be American citizens at that time.
U.S. versus Thind was the law of the land for 24 years.
In my mind, it was strict racism, that they didn't want these brown people to come here and live and work.
To add insult to injury, California laws prevented marriage across racial lines. The prospects for a happy family life were dim, until the Mexicans arrived.
Not 5 or 6, but 300 men had married women from Mexico. And there were all these children: Maria Jesusita Singh, Jose Akbar Khan, beautiful names that showed clearly the bi-ethnic nature of the community. This is actually the first set of weddings between Sikhs, Punjabis, and Mexican-American women that I was able to find. And it's 2 sisters marrying 2 Sikh partners from the Punjab. This photo of Lucy Singh and Ali Abdullah is also extremely interesting because Lucy Singh is a Sikh name. Ali Abdullah means that he's the son of a Muslim. Both of them had Mexican mothers. They're both Spanish-speaking Catholics, and they're marrying each other. To a person from India or Pakistan, this would appear very odd. And I found it fascinating social history. Incredible stories. Chicken curry mixed with, Mexican food. Just a fantastic, classic American story of migrants adapting to each other as they adapted to America.
In India in the 1940s, radical social and political changes were sweeping across the land. Gandhi won his nonviolent war for Indian independence. Lord Mountbatten presided over England's withdrawal from what had been her largest colony for nearly 100 years. Nehru, the first prime minister of the newly independent country, began to build the elite public education system that would become the social and economic backbone of modern India. And in the U.S., after World War II, where people from many different ethnic backgrounds fought side by side as American soldiers, there was a new openness about immigration.
In 1946, the Luce Seller Act was passed, which allowed Asian Indians to become American citizens.
Finally, after 40 years as a farm laborer, Kulwant's grandfather became a landowner.
And he bought 10 acres first, then he bought another 10 acres.
In general, they had a very, very good life. They achieved something. Some of them own thousands and thousands of acres of land, even though they have no education. They couldn't even sign it.
For many, it was the triumph of a lifetime.
My grandmother waited for my grandfather all her life, and she always talked about him. And just before he died, she received a letter that he will be coming to India. She was so happy. I was 6 years old that time. I still remember that. Then one day we received a telegram that he died.
His legacy and Kulwant's inheritance was 20 acres in America. In the 1970s, Kulwant arrived in Yuba City to claim his fortune and his place in this American story.
Later on, I sold those 20 acres and bought 100 acres. It was hard to sell my grandfather's land. And later on, another 400 acres, 200 acres, and now I own 800 acres. I think my grandfather would be very, very proud of me today.
India didn't really exist in the way it is now until the British arrived. And the British came and found thousands of little principalities or kingdoms and forced them to come together in this bureaucracy.
In 1947, to the amazement of the world, Gandhi and his rebels peacefully forced the British out. His winning strategy would be reenacted on the streets of America.
Well, certainly Martin Luther King drew heavily on Gandhi, and Gandhi was a tremendous inspiration to the civil rights movement and to many other nonviolent movements around the world.
After a century of British colonialism, India had suffered much, but had gained the English language and a hard-earned respect for freedom.
It's the biggest democracy in the world. Indians exercise their right to vote at a far higher proportion than Americans do these days.
Nehru, India's first prime minister, understood India's needs, and he understood America.
In the 50s and 60s, a change happens in America. There is a sudden interest in technological and technical infrastructure, in building it up. And the only way they can do that is to have trained people.
In India, the first students to benefit from Nehru's educational reforms were ready for work. Nehru paid a visit to the Kennedy White House. Groundbreaking legislation in the 1960s would chart the course for a more colorful and more tolerant America. In 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. A year later, he signed the landmark Immigration Naturalization Act of 1965, which opened the gates to skilled professionals worldwide.
So they came in, urban people from all over India, not just from the Punjabi-speaking area, but from Tamil Nadu, Kannada-speaking area, Telugu, Bengali, Gujarati, all over India. And they were so diverse that they brought their wives and children with them. They came as family units. They wanted to transmit their culture to their children.
Jackson Heights in Queens, New York, became the Indian port of entry.
Jackson Heights is one of my favorite places in New York. It's a place that an Indian can go and feel like they're at home. And there are parts of Jackson Heights that look and feel like you are walking down the streets of New Delhi or Bombay.
Ramesh Navani came to America as a college-educated business pioneer in 1971. He helped create Little India, the largest Indian retail market outside of India itself, in Jackson Heights. Salmon Raj was the first Indian store in Jackson Heights. Later, Ramesh opened Sari Palace.
From one, we have almost 200 businesses here. And the major business which is driving people in is first is the gold business. You cannot take away Indian lady away from gold. They can come and buy their ethnic wear. They can come and buy their jewelry. They can come and indulge in their own cuisine. And this has become, as a result, a tourist spot.
And the signs are everywhere.
Well, what I'm intrigued about is the mainstreaming of Indian culture in this country.
The henna tattoo is a big cultural phenomenon in the United States. Bollywood is a word that combines Bombay, the commercial city in India, the big commercial capital of India, and Hollywood. There's also a renewed interest in Indian cooking and Indian cuisine that you see in the restaurant capital of the world.
You watch in the next couple of years, India's fashions are going to be more popular than even now that they are.
Like the Nehru jacket.
It's a very hip look, and people looked at him with a lot of respect. You know, it gives you, what would you say, that power.
American-born Sunita Kanwar enjoys and sells traditional Indian clothing at the Jackson Heights boutique founded by her father.
Years ago, our national dress, which is the sari, was voted one of the sexiest dresses, sexiest outfits by one of the U.S. magazines.
In high school, she was suddenly in fashion in America in a style that was more than 5,000 years old.
There are tons and tons of styles now that anybody can wear, not only Indians, but non-Indians can be wearing these type of styles.
I do think that cultures are coming together and that these flows and interactions are what will energize and give life to all cultures involved. I think for those who came in the late 60s and 70s, the greatest challenge is their children. They fear greatly for their children. I don't think they should. Their children know what they're doing. They're Americans through and through.
Which is in a way good because they don't have any conflict in their minds or in their hearts.
They will get a lot of good points from this great country. They will melt. They will not remain Indian. Okay, they'll be a different type of Indian. Their brain will be like a Western type, but they will look like Indian.
The great thing about Indian culture and Indian heritage is that it sort of sticks on you.
In Silicon Valley, the Indian people are very proud to be belonging to a heritage and a culture that is so ancient, that is, really thousands of years old.